Well, hello, everybody, at this amazing conference that Genesis put together with such an array of fantastic speakers. I'm coming to you. You see, my background is that I'm actually coming to you from Bali, the home of the gods. Such a beautiful place to be. I'm not actually holidaying. I'm working on my next book, which is about one of the leaders of the ex-gay, or sometimes known conversion therapy movement. But anyway, I'm here to cover a number of topics with you today. Let me just let you know what they are. I'm going to talk about the gay Christian scripture resolution process, belief resolution options, sexuality resolution process, PTSD, and strategies of the management. Maybe first of all, it would be good for me just to share with you a little bit about my own journey so you have some background. So, in a previous life, I was a high profile Pentecostal preacher. Here in Australia, I used to preach regularly in all the mega churches, preach to thousands every weekend. Churches like Hillsong, which maybe some of you have heard of. But of course, going back to my early days, it was my homosexuality that brought me into Christianity. I was born in 1951 and was discovered I was gay at a time when that meant you could be criminalized and jailed, or you could be sent to an institution, or you could experience all sorts of horrific aversion therapies to try and cure you and change you. So in that environment, it was what drove me to actually turn to Jesus as the answer, because I tried everything else after attempted suicide and going to a psychiatrist. So that began my journey, which lasted at least 22 years, which went through a whole range of things. First of all, I thought that my conversion had freed me of my homosexuality. Then I thought that maybe that I need more power. So that's when I went into the Pentecostal charismatic movement, experienced the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And then when that wasn't working, it was suggested by my Bible college principal that I had demon spirits in me. So I went through several weeks of exorcisms. That didn't work either. It was still there, and so I put myself in one of the world's first gay conversion therapy programs in 1972, which was a residential program. And if I stayed there for 2 years, that said would make me straight. I didn't last 2 years, but I did get married, and I had a wonderful marriage with a great woman, and we have two beautiful daughters. So that was great. But the what happened, of course, was that I became incredibly successful as a preacher in the Pentecostal world, and but after all the time still fighting my homosexuality. Then one encounter that I had with a guy changed everything. It touched me deep down inside, the part of me that I'd been trying to kill, suppress, hope one day would go away, and that was my gay self. And it came alive. And the cloak of denial that I covered myself in was ripped apart. I fell in love. And of course, I could no longer preach. I knew that, because that would be completely hypocritical, because I actually wanted the love. I wanted to be loved by him, and I wanted to love him. That affair was discovered. I did a public confession in front of a church of about 800 people, which was, as you can probably imagine, completely devastating and traumatizing. And it was soon after that then I moved to Sydney, away from all of that, and to begin a new life as an openly gay man. That was 1992. In 2004, I released my autobiography, the first edition, A Life of Unlearning, a preacher's struggle with his homosexuality, church of faith, which became a bestseller in Australia and sold out twice. We're now to the third edition. But what that did was that opened up a whole new world for people which had never been able to share their experiences with anybody else. I've worked with estimated about 4,000 conversion therapy survivors, and the number of people who've experienced LGBT people who've experienced faith sexuality conflict. Also, that would be, there's no way I could count how many people that I've worked with in that area. So, the emails began from day one, flooding into my inbox. Many of them began with "Your story is my story." And thank you for your honesty, because the autobiography is, as one interviewer put it, brutal honesty. I haven't held anything back whatsoever. So it was out of that I've been working in this space now for nearly 20 years with survivors of conversion therapy practices, and also with people experiencing faith sexuality conflict. And it is what I've learned working in these spaces that I'm going to be sharing with you today. Let me just let you know what I'll be covering. First of all, I'll be going through the gay Christians resolution process. Then we'll be talking about the belief resolution options, different ways to resolve Christian belief system, the sexuality resolution process. And finally, I want to talk about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and strategies of management for that. So let's look first of all at the gay scripture process. So what happens is that, for many of us from this background, if we're LGBTQ, that the first thing that might happen for us is that we realize that actually I am okay. And for some, it's God loves me just as I am. And for me, at that point, when I reached that, I thought maybe I should look at those scriptures again, because I had not been, of course, reading my Bible or looking at that. I thought maybe I should have a look at that. So I began reading. The next step, of course, is that as you begin to read about those 6 individual passages, you begin to discover things like, number one, of course, the Genesis is not a story about homosexuality whatsoever. There's a whole range of interpretations about that. You can find them on our website if you want to have a look at that. And so there's this thing that comes up for you, or maybe I'm just trying to justify myself. What I say then is keep reading. The next step of the process is, well, am I being deceived? And that could be a very, very real fear if you come from our Christian background. And I say, well, just keep reading. Then you get to a point where you realize that this is not a black and white issue, as we used to think it was. The Bible says this, it's all clear, it's black and white. No, it isn't. When you start looking at the historical and cultural context and the original languages, you realize that this is not a black and white issue. And also, you may have realized that the word homosexuality did not even enter the English translation of the Bible till 1946. And you realize that Romans 1 is not talking about homosexuality, it's talking about a pagan practice. And you realize that 2 Corinthians 5:9 is actually a total mistranslation of 2 Greek words. So, and Leviticus, once again, those other passages where it talks about man should not lie with a man, that is also speaking about pagan rituals, prostitution, pagan prostitution, temple prostitution. That's exactly what that's talking about. So I say keep reading. And so the next step then is, well, it isn't just gay theologians believe this, but also heterosexual Christians believe the same. And so then you get to a point where the evidence is overwhelming, and then that's completely resolved. There's no issue for you anymore about that, which is a great place to get to. So it's interesting that when I shared this in a Bible college that I was teaching at, that the lecturer who actually had invited me there to speak as a straight person said, you know what, that's exactly the process that I went through. And she's now, of course, an LGBTQ advocate. So let's look also at belief resolution options. So if you have a belief system that's in conflict with being LGBTQ and you move away from that, then there are several options. Of course, the first is to live in denial, but that, of course, is not a very, very healthy place to be. Of course, you can completely reject the previous belief system, which I'm sure that there are many with a part of this conference, that's exactly what they've done. and some people have become atheists. Other people have had other approaches. So it isn't an either-or situation. There are actual other options. One is that you can adopt a whole new belief system, which may be of a different religion, may be of New Age, may be new spirituality, a whole different way of looking at things. Also, another option is to completely redefine your beliefs. And I found something helpful was to categorize my beliefs. So by categorizing, I meant that I put my beliefs in various categories. Number one was, this is a non-negotiable. So this is what I believe. Yeah, this is what's true for me right now. And I would put that at the top, and I put certain things in that. I guess one of the things I would put in that is, there's something out there. I look at my life and the way that things come together, and the synchronicity that happens, and of course the not just the synchronistic events, but the amazing sense of purpose that I have. So, without going into too much depth, that's really in my non-negotiables. Then the next level down, I would put in possibilities. So, this is something that the jury is still out on. I'm not necessarily holding that as a, yes, this is a really major part of my belief system. And then the next category down is to actually say, well, who cares? So, there might be something in there about, well, can we speak to people who have passed away? Do we have access to spirit worlds? There's a whole range of things, and you decide. It is about you. Instead of you being told what you believe, it is about you choosing what you believe, and in those different categories. Another option is to try on beliefs for a season. So some people, you know what, I'm going to try living as a Buddhist for 12 months, or 6 months, or I'm going to try some other form of belief system and just see, does this work for me? Do I feel comfortable with it? Does it resonate with me? And does it work? More importantly, another option is to suspend your beliefs. The next one, of course, is to put your beliefs on hold. Now, some people say, what's the difference between those two things? Well, when I started to resolve my own belief system with my sexuality, I was attending a personal development course. And this personal development course was a combination of spirituality, New Age teaching, religion, science, philosophy, a whole range of things. And a lot of it resonated with me because it was some of the stuff I used to preach. But, I always thought these are Christian beliefs and Christian principles, but they're actually universal principles. And in exploring that, I found some of that quite challenging. And one of the people, as a part of that program, said to me, which was really helpful, they said, Anthony, no one is here to tell you to change your belief system. But what we are asking is that you suspend your beliefs a period of time. Suspend them. Let's just put them aside so that you look at the possibility of new options. And that, to me, was really, really helpful at the time because I still had that very much black and white truth error type belief. Another thing you can do, which I did for probably about 8 years after I came out, was to actually put my beliefs on hold. I couldn't actually go there. The whole thought of doing that, thinking about that, trying to resolve that, there was too much pain, there was too much trauma, and I just, I had no answers to the questions that I had. In fact, I thought I never would find any answers. So where was my Christian belief system during that time? It was on the shelf or put on hold. Another option, which some people might find quite unique, is you can hold several beliefs at once. When we come from our Christian background, we are very much told that this is either truth or this is error. And so, having that to deal with, one way is that you can begin to maybe hold different beliefs. It might be like a belief around spirituality. It might be some New Age belief system. It might be some pagan system. It might be, you could bundle them all together if you like and come up with your own. Now, of course, one of the popular things right now is that people are deconstructing, reconstructing, and we have this term evangelical. I think that I was doing this before it became a thing, or even we had any words for it. But that's what a lot of people are doing these days. They are really deconstructing their Christian belief system, and looking at things like heaven and hell, Jesus being the only sacrifice for the world, Christianity being the only religion where people experience salvation, a whole range of things, deconstructing that and then reconstructing it still with a Christian flavor. And they're ex-evangelicals in that they used to be evangelicals, but even though they have rejected that total belief system, they may still have some part of that as a part of their life. Okay, we're going to move on to the next thing now. As I can see, I'm going through this fairly quickly, and we could dig down deep into every one of these things, but we don't have time today. I should also say that a lot of what I'm sharing with you today is a part of my seminar that I run, which is called Walking Between Worlds, working with LGBT people from faith backgrounds. And so when I run that seminar, a whole range of people from various backgrounds who work with LGBTQ people from Christian backgrounds come along for training, and I share with them some of these principles. That could be chaplains, pastors, church leaders, LGBT workers, social workers, youth workers, telephone counselors, a whole range of people. Because, if you are LGBTQ, and from a Christian background, you have some very, very unique issues to work through. And also, you often experience the same things that the average LGBTQ person experiences, but you experience them with greater intensity. In fact, from my experience working in this area, it's not hard it's very believable to say that LGBTQ people from faith backgrounds are one of the highest risk groups in our community in a number of areas, including, of course, depression, anxiety, thoughts of suicide attempts. So they're one of the most at-risk groups. And the reason for that, of course, is the inner conflict that is going on for them regarding their faith and their sexuality. It doesn't just change overnight when people come out. In fact, when people come out, sometimes it can create more problems. That intensive cognitive dissonance plays out in the process of their resolution, also moving forward after they come out. And also what they often have to deal with is years of internalized homophobia and self-loathing and self-hatred, which of course have caused great damage in their lives. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the sexuality resolution process. And this might be helpful to some of you watching this today. I know that when I get to the last section, so often I get people from our faith background saying, I'm not at that last step as yet, and there is still more work to do. And I believe the thing that is holding them back from getting to that final step is, of course, their Christian belief system, which still might be playing out, or the damage done from years of trying to actually try and resolve that inner intense cognitive dissonance. So, of course, for all of us, whether you're gay or straight, there's a time when we are completely unaware of sexuality. And of course, we don't know that we're gay. I've talked with people who said that when they were 3, they knew they were gay. Watching something in cartoons on TV and already fixating, so they're male, fixating on the male hero and how gorgeous he was, or if it was the female, it might be fixating on the beautiful princess, whatever. But that wasn't like that for me. I wasn't aware of those things. But for I would say the majority of people, the awareness comes, of course, the same time that awareness of sexuality comes for heterosexual people. Which is around puberty, when you become sexually aware. And so that's the first step. I don't actually know I'm gay. The next step, of course, is, okay, so I'm attracted to the same gender. And the process then could be very much, well, no, I'm not actually gay. I am just experimenting. Maybe I was drunk, or it was a situation where I was coerced, but no, I'm not actually gay. Then the next step of the process can be rejection of the sexual orientation. And a belief that you can change it. So you begin fighting this thing which is in you, but not just in you, but as a part of you, very much a part of you. And so you work at trying to suppress it, trying to deny it, trying to kill it, trying to do everything you can to get rid of this thing. And of course, when that actually doesn't work, and once again, I'm speaking from my own experience here, but it also relates to many people I've worked with, is the next step is suppression. So, but if I can control this, and you put all sorts of strategies in place to try and control any thoughts, feelings, actions, behaviors that you have, you may continually monitor yourself. The way you dress, the way you speak, what gestures you have, all those sorts of things, never to give any indication that you might be gay or lesbian. And so, there's that suppression. When the suppression doesn't work, the next step is that people often move then into hatred, because there's this constant battle going on. And you have attached to your sexual orientation the thoughts that this thing is an abomination, that this thing is evil, that this thing is against God's will, all those things. And so you begin to actually hate that thing. And self-hatred and self-loathing can be very, very much a part of it. I know for me, in the early writings that I read, like of David Wilkinson, the famous Pentecostal preacher, and others used to talk about the only way that you can overcome homosexuality is to really hate it, hate your flesh, hate everything about it. And so one of the strategies you try and you put in place to try and overcome your homosexuality is that you develop this very, very strong self-hatred and self-loathing, which of course comes into play anytime you might, in inverted commas, fall, anytime you might slip up, anytime you have sex with someone of the same gender, or watching porn or something or other like that. It is after those things that's when the self-hatred and self-loathing kicks in. So if people move beyond that, of course, the next step is that they get to a point of acceptance. How wonderful is that? Finally, the battle is over. Well, sort of. The battle is over for some people at that point. And they will come out and they'll begin to feel a sense of pride as opposed to, again, a sense of shame. But what I've discovered is that for some people, their acceptance is not a healthy acceptance. It's more like, I guess I've just got to put up with this, or I guess I've just got to tolerate it, or I guess I've got no other options but to accept that. And I was in that space for, quite some time myself, so I understand what that is. And that can be just as unhealthy as the other problems below. Now, of course, I've come across people, and this always shocked me, that they would say that, oh, well, I've accepted my homosexuality, but I still think I'm going to go to hell. Imagine living with that as a part of your belief system. That would begin to initiate self-destructive behaviors. It's not a good place to be. So acceptance is great, but there's a very big difference between acceptance, being healthy or being unhealthy. Some people skip the unhealthy part completely, and they come out and they feel resolved, and it's all very, very healthy. They have a sense of pride. But I always say there's one more place to go, and that is to a place of celebration. So it's no longer I can change it, I can control it, I hate being gay, or I've sort of reluctantly accepted it. I actually love being gay. And if I was reincarnated and I was asked, what would you like to be this time? What I would say, well, I love to be gay. Why not? What a great life. I love being gay. I love my tribe. I love the culture. I love the humor. I love my gay friends. Life is really, really good. And, I said before that sometimes people realize when they look at this, they haven't actually got to that point of celebration, which is a shame. I would encourage you to find ways and means, and maybe some of what you're getting at this wonderful conference put on by Janice today is actually going to be helping you to get to that point. Okay, so let's move on now to talk about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, for me, I mentioned about the time when I stood in front of that congregation of, 800 people and confessed that I had committed adultery and was resigning from the ministry. Of all the many events in my life that have been traumatic, that would definitely have to be the hardest. It was the darkest day of my life. So bad, that I remember that I cried for 3 weeks every day. I would try and pluck up the courage to get out of bed. I'd begin the day weeping. I would finish the day weeping. It was a very, very dark time. I wondered whether I would ever actually come out of that. It seemed to stay with me forever. But of course, there have been many other traumatic experiences. In my early days, I got bashed, I got raped, I got robbed at what we call in Australia beats when I was experimenting with my first early sexual experiences in the 60s. There was only one place to do that. That was at parks, public toilets, things like that. So there have been lots of traumatic experiences going along through my life. I guess some people would call it complex PTSD. And if I went to get it diagnosed, I'm sure that's probably the diagnosis that I would come up with. What, of course, I didn't realize was that, initially I thought PTSD was something that veterans experience. So this was something that only happened, to people who'd been fighting in wars and, seeing people killed and, all the horrors of war. But I began to realize this is not totally isolated to that experience. And we know now that there can be religious trauma from traumatic experiences, which is a form of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I didn't realize for years that this was impacting me. And then one day I happened upon a movie. The movie was called Sunshine and Oranges, which was about a woman who was a social worker in the UK. Someone had come to her to say, look, I was sent to Australia and adopted by a family there when I was 3 years of age, and I really don't know who my real mother is. Can you help me find my real mother? So Margaret, the social worker, began to do that. And as she began to explore and dig down, what she uncovered was unbelievable. 150,000 children had been deported from the UK by the government to a whole range of countries in the British Empire. They were told their parents were dead. The parents in the UK were told that their children were in good homes. They didn't know they left the country. And so as she explored this, she found that this was a government program. Now, in Australia, which was some of the people that she dealt with, which is where she was looking, that she discovered that so many of them, they were put on farms, they were put in religious institutions, and what they experienced there was, of course, sexual abuse, slavery, like physical abuse. The stories were horrendous. Now, she got to a point where she was actually became unwell. It was affecting her mental health, not just the mental health, physical health as well. And she was in bed and she was actually losing her hair. Her husband said to her, you need to go and see a doctor right now. She went to the doctor, and as she talked to the doctor said to her, you have PTSD. And I went, oh my God, how could she have PTSD? She hasn't experienced the trauma. She's just been listening to the stories. And that was my, oh my God moment. Or what the fuck, if you like. Because you realize, I suddenly realized, oh my God, first of all, I completely re-traumatized myself by writing my autobiography, by having to go to those experiences and actually digging down, feeling them, and then putting them on the page for the reader. And so that re-traumatized me. When the book sold out, I rewrote the book from page 1, so I did it again, and then I did it a third time for the third edition. But also, I had been hearing these stories. I used to have these emotional meltdowns. Sometimes I'd go and meet with I'd sit at the computer and I would read another horrendous story about rejection, about suicide attempts, about all these things. And then I go, oh my God. And I just sit there and cry and cry. Why? Because it was triggering my own trauma. Not just it was sad and horrific what happened to them, it was triggering my own trauma. So seeing this movie, seeing what happened to Margaret, I went, oh my God. So I went off. I booked myself into a therapist who I'd had a few sessions with before, knew my story. And I said to him, could I have PTSD? And he actually found that really quite amusing. Of course I could have PTSD. So I'm not a psychologist. So that's the disclaimer here. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just sharing my own experiences. So I think one way of reducing the impact of PTSD is to face it, not avoid it. Initially, when triggered, avoidance is the automatic subconscious reaction to the trauma. You might not be consciously aware of what happened or why it happened. The more it happens, eventually the avoidance becomes conscious, then the conscious behavior becomes a pattern. Then you're stuck with a habit. I've found the trick is to become more conscious of what is happening and short-circuit the subconscious automatic responses with a variety of conscious strategies. And that's what I'm going to share with you now, what some of these strategies have been that I've learnt and put into practice. The first thing I've got there is to ensure you've got a sense of humor. Oh my God. As I was working in this space and working with so many traumatized people and hearing so many really intense stories, heartbreaking stories. I found that I actually lost my sense of humor, and I became a very, very intense person myself. Um, and that did not help me. But of recent years, what I have done is that I have ensured to what's the word? Well, to get my sense of humor back again, to resurrect it. There's a religious word for you. To resurrect my sense of humor, and enjoy it, because it really is a part of me, and it makes life so much more fun. Another thing that I think has really helped me is that I've always had an interest in personal development. I used to preach many of those principles myself, at youth camps and things like that. I would talk about those things. So and that was part of me getting away from putting my belief system on hold, because I was reconnecting with some things that were familiar with me. And yeah, personal development is a love of mine, and you might have your favorite author, so you might not even be involved in it, but it's a great thing. Self-improvement is a very good thing, and be focusing on that instead of the trauma, and also putting in some future goals, having some wonderful things to work towards, in my setting up of ambassadors at Bridge Builders International. There are so many wonderful goals that we have that take my time and energy. And but it's not just taking my time and energy. I love what I do. I enjoy what I do. It's fulfilling. It's rewarding. It's knowing it's making a difference. And there was a time actually a few years back when I had about 6 months where I kept thinking about suicide, which was really quite weird because I wasn't totally depressed. I wasn't really happy, but I wasn't totally depressed. But the thoughts of suicide constantly were plaguing me, of which I was rejecting. But they were there, where they hadn't been before. And I remember the thing that snapped it out of me was that I decided that I would do a book launch for the 3rd edition of The Life of Unlearning. And suddenly I had something else to focus my attention on. And I found that lifted me completely out of those things that's never, ever come back. So I guess that leads me on to the next thing, which is about always, being more conscious of thinking positively and speaking positively. It's pretty simple, but I think if we're sufferers of PTSD, it's something that we need to remind ourselves of regularly. Another thing that I found helpful is that I've learned to become an observer. So if I'm experiencing some trigger or some emotion from PTSD or something is going on, instead of being a participant and being involved, I've learned to step back and think about what is happening here. I often say to myself, that's interesting that you feel that way. Have a little conversation with myself, but I remove myself by becoming an observer. I think the next one is really important, and this is something that you need to decide for yourself. But I've decided that I refuse to give people or experiences power over me. And there have been experiences in the past where obviously people, had really been very damaging in my life and had control over me. And recently, I had an apology from the group that actually I was a part of for the residential conversion therapy program, and they became an affirming church, and they apologized to me. And we went back to a place of real trauma for me where I was humiliated, and I took back my power. I found also that reframing things can take away the negative. By reframing, you begin to look at it from a different perspective, a different aspect. This is a very, very important strategy, I believe. And you can remove the emotional trauma. You can remove the impacts of that by totally reframing it. Another thing, and you might not like this, but I've found this to be true, is that forgiveness can be helpful. And people often tell me, like, well, ask me, why is it that you're in such a good place? Like, I see so many other people who are bitter and twisted and really angry. How come you're not there? I said, well, there was a point when I knew I was rejected by the denomination, by my friends and everything. They actually chose to forgive them because I knew what I had to face in front of me. The last thing I needed to be experiencing was bitterness and resentment. And so I chose to forgive. I think another strategy which is helpful is to express your emotions, not to fear them. And another thing to do is to make peace with your past. It wasn't all bad. Find the good that was there and don't be afraid to talk about the good things that happened as if you might be betraying your past, because there were good things. I tell people words only have the power we give them. So when you are being told you're an abomination, you're a pervert, you're a deviant, yes, that may trigger you, but remember, those words will only have the power that you give them. Another important thing is to become very self-aware and know what your triggers are. If you know what your triggers are, you are less likely to be put in situations or put yourself in situations where you're going to be triggered. Sometimes that can't be avoided, but sometimes it can. One of the things I know that I have to watch is going to watch movies. Anything that has grief or loss in it can be incredibly triggering for me. But if I go, I'll go with friends, and I'll make sure I have a debrief afterwards. Here's another thing which is really important, and I see so many people make a mistake here. Don't feed the trauma. Some people keep going back to the places where, or in their thinking, but websites, forums, making comments on various articles, what they're doing is they're actually constantly feeding the trauma. And oh dear, it's so sad. It's just so observable with some people. This is exactly what they're doing. Don't feed your trauma. And I'm going to finish with this thing. It is okay to avoid and get triggered. Remember, in our previous belief system, we're always trying to be perfect, trying to be holy, never make a mistake, always do the right thing. But I want to tell you, I'm not perfect. I'm in a very good place. I'm in a very, very good place and very happy with these strategies which I've been working with. Initially, I thought, I wonder whether it's just my makeup which has helped me get to this place, or is it that the wonderful words that the therapist gave me, which was, the trauma never leaves you, you just learn to manage it. The trauma never leaves you, just learn to manage it. And that's exactly what I've been doing. And these are some of the strategies that I've put into place. So most of the time these things work for me, but of course I'm human and there are times when I get triggered. And that's okay. It's okay to avoid things if you want to, and it's okay to get triggered. So as I say, the disclaimer is I'm not a qualified therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I've just found these things helpful for me, and I hope they help you as well. There obviously would, possibly be some things that I brought up today that you'd like to have some further clarity on, or that you would like some further information on. We have a whole range of information on our website, www.abby.org.au. There's information resources there. Also, if you want to email me, feel free to email me, info@abby, which is abbi.org.au. That's info@abby.org.au. And so far to date, I have answered every email I've got from people. So you will hear back from me. No question is it's too hard. And maybe I've already produced a resource which is going to help you. So it's been great to share this with you today. And once again, I hope that it's been helpful. And all the best with your journey.